So the first thing I do with any project is make a new project. So I go to the project window, I say new, and I call this Squarcona product, Monday, Wednesday. Okay, and I'm going to make sure it's in my work folder for 2510, and I hit accept. All right, so now before I actually get into doing the product, what I want to do is go through the tools that we're going to be using. So under the polygon menu, I'm just going to make a cube just so you can see what the tools are. All right, so we're going to use mainly 3 tools for this. One of the tools is called the insert edge loop. Okay, if you remember back on the room thing, we played with the insert edge loop tool. If I have this cube and I want to stretch the center out but not touch the top or the bottom, I need loops, I need a division, I need something there to be able to do that. Okay, so I can insert an edge loop right down the center, and all I do is click right on this edge and it puts it in going the opposite direction, and now I could scale this out or scale that in. Okay, so you can see very quickly how I can do that. So again, insert mesh tools, insert edge loop, and I just click on one edge and it'll do that. If I click and drag, it'll let me position it where I need to position it. So if I have a specific spot that I want that edge to be, I can position it by dragging it. The hardest thing people get is they try to, kind of like Photoshop or Illustrator, where you're dragging out guides, is they click on this edge trying to drag out another edge, but it's not that way. It's the other way, is that we would click this way to drag it out. So I'm clicking on the opposite direction of what I want the edge to be. All right, so insert edge loop tool, great tool. Going to the option box for this, one of the things I will commonly do is the multiple edge loops. So if I needed 5 or 6 or whatever, and then I could just click and it'll put in 6 divisions, boom, 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 right after another, perfectly equal right across the board, which is really nice. The other one I'll commonly use is equal distance from edge. And maybe not. Doesn't seem to want to play nice. What that one should have done is it should have put it evenly distanced between each edge, and it didn't do that. So whatever. Typically I just deal with this one, just the insert edge loop, and then very rarely I'll go to the multiple if I need multiple edge loops. Okay. So let me undo this just to get back to where I was before. There. Okay. All right, so now I have this. So let's say now, instead of me dragging the center one in, I wanted to keep the shape the same shape. I just wanted to like notch it in, right? So I just had a division in there. So it wasn't so abrupt like this. Like, see how it changes the entire shape of this? I don't want to do that. I just want to notch in a little bit there. So if I go back to my edge loops, and I insert an edge loop here, insert an edge loop there, then I grab the center one by double clicking and scale it. You can see how I can notch that one in. So it keeps the shape, and then I have this little like notch in the middle of it. Okay? So that's a nice way to be able to do that, is by using edge loops to do that. Now a problem with doing it with edge loops, look at the size of these divisions here. Do you see how one of the divisions is pretty small and the other one is pretty big, right? So as I drag that, I'm eyeballing it. That's all I'm doing. I can't physically get an accurate click of exactly where I want that to be easily. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click the edge, and I'm going to go to the next tool that we're going to go through, which is under Edit Mesh, and it's called Bevel. Okay, and Bevel allows us to take one edge and split it up into multiple edges. All right. So for this one, it took that one edge that was here, and now I have 2 edges. I can go to the segments and add 2 divisions, and you'll see that I get essentially what I had a minute ago. I have one edge going around the center, and then I have one edge going around the top and one around the bottom. The nice thing about this is I can play with this fraction and control how wide apart that is. Okay, so if I set this to 0.05, you can see how narrow it is, and it's even, which is wonderful. So now we can double click, I can scale this in, and you see we have a nice, exactly the same thing we had before, but it's evenly spaced, okay, which is obviously something we like to have. Things are evenly spaced, it looks a lot nicer, it looks a lot more professional when we start doing other stuff. Okay, so that is Bevel, and that's essentially the biggest thing with Bevel, is doing that. I'll also use Bevel for, if I grab this, edit mesh and go to Bevel, for just rounding off a surface. So the bigger I make this number, oops, let me turn this to offset as fraction off. There we go. You can see that I can round this surface more, and I can add more segments and create some nice roundings on here using Bevel instead of me trying to physically round that part off. Now, one of the issues that you'll run into with Bevel is if you don't click the stuff correctly. So I beveled this, and then I said, oops, I forgot I wanted to also bevel this, and this, and this. So you'll see how this doesn't now blend nicely into that, right? Because it's pretty wide, and then it like tapers down, okay? So if you do that, you always want to undo it, and then re-grab it, and then re-bevel it, and you'll get a nice division right there. Okay, that's nice and uniform. All right, so bevel is another one that you'll use over and over and over again. And then the last one that we're going to be dealing with is extrude. So on here, let's say I wanted to take this and I wanted to indent this a little bit. I just wanted like a little notch put in the top of this lid. Under edit, I would go to extrude, and I would outline where I want that notch to be. So right about there, I would say. A weird thing is happening if you look at this. See this little cross over here where this is going this way and then that way, and I have these things on top of each other. I also have these black dashes in here. So what's happening is that it's going back to this bevel, and as I offset it, that bevel is crossing itself. Okay? So sometimes it's a good thing to use the offset. This time it's not, because it's going to do that. In this case, I would just go to scale, and I would just scale this in, and you see I don't get that same issue. Okay? So what I'm going to do is outline. I want this to be where the notch starts, and then I'm going to go to edit mesh and say extrude again, grab the blue arrow and push it down. Okay? Now I needed to do two extrudes, one to define where that center area is, and then another one to push it into the surface. If I try to do it with one, I scale it in, I move it down, you see how we don't get a nice edge there, it like tapers it in kind of funky. So I go to extrude again, see the hotkey is Control E, so if you see me not going up here, that's what I'm doing. Alright, so now I have a nice little notch in the top of this. Okay, so those are the three tools that you're going to see me use when I make the first part of this product. So the first one I'm going to make is a little hand lotion type thing here. So you see this little vintage organic night cream? That's essentially what I'm going to make. So the first thing we do with any of these is I'm going to make a shape. And for most things, I like to start off with a cube, and we'll find that the cube is actually not going to be a good choice to start off with, but it shouldn't really matter if I choose the wrong thing because of how quick this process is going to go. Alright, so my first step in this is kind of like outline. Like if I was to just draw a box around this item, what would that box be? That's what I'm drawing here. Okay, so if I'm drawing a bigger case of cream, it would be like that. If it's like a lip balm type thing, it would obviously be smaller and shorter and whatever else. So something like that. Now it also doesn't matter, it matters proportionately, but it doesn't matter overall scale. So if I take this and just scale it down like this tiny, it's not really gonna matter because I can always scale it back up. But if I started with something that was like this, that's a little bit harder to make it look like that in the end. Okay? So that's all I'm looking at right now is just proportions. Now your tools will also come into play when you do your sizing. So when you do your bevel or you do extrudes and whatever else, if your scale is super tiny, those numbers are going to jump huge. Like you're going to go from 0.1 to 0.2 and it's just going to go like that. But if your stuff is huge, 0.1 and 0.2 is just a small number. Okay, so I kind of build my stuff to like this kind of scale and then go from there. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is I need to segment where is the lid, where is the bottom. So if we look at this, you can see in this case we have this coming up like this, and then it comes over, and then it goes up, and then it comes over again. So that's my first goal, is just to get this kind of sectioned off. So I'm going to go to Insert Edge Loops, and I'm going to put an edge loop right about there. Maybe a little bit higher, I'll just move it up. There we go. Okay. So now what I need to do is I need to grab the top and I need to scale it in. Okay, so watch what happens when I scale the top in. I'm going to go to my scale tool, and as you're scaling something that's supposed to be uniform, like left and right and front to back, okay, never grab scales individually because you can never really get it to be exact. Always grab the center and scale it, or grab this little green box and scale that. It'll keep it uniform. All right. So as this is doing it, you can see the problem is that it's tapering the bottom of the box, right? That's obviously not what we want. So what I can do is, back there, if I go to my insert edge loops and I click another edge loop right here, that'll help me divide the top area from the bottom area. Okay, so one is going to be the top, one will be the bottom. So I'll go back and grab those faces again, and I'll go back to my scale and I'll grab this. And now you can see how the top is not shrinking the bottom. Okay? So that looks pretty good like that. Good. Okay. Now you might be wondering, why did we start off with a cube? Well, remember, most of the stuff that we're going to do is going to be roughed in and then smoothed out. So this is the rough version. When I hit 3, that'll be the smoothed out version. Okay? Now, as a smoothed out version, that doesn't look really good. It looks like a big blobby mess. It doesn't look like a lotion. But that's where beveling can come in. Okay, so if I go to my edges and I double click this edge here, or grab the edges all the way around, sometimes it lets you do it and sometimes it don't. Oops. Oops. Like that one's not working correctly, so I'll just grab these individually. And what I'm doing is grabbing all the edges that are facing this left and right direction, the X and the Z direction. All right, so I have them looped all the way around. Now I'll go to bevel. And I'll put in 2 divisions, and I'll put in a small fraction. So I hold Control, and I drag this to shrink it down. There we go. Okay, so now I have a nice small division there. I'll go back to object mode, click on it, hit 3, and now you can see that that now looks a lot more like our lotion container, right? We look back to this, and we look back to that. It's looking pretty much like it. Now, one of the issues we have with this is that the top part is maybe a little bit too crisp. Okay, so you see here how crisp that is and how round that is. So if I change this here, if I just go to the edge and double click this edge, and I push that down, and I grab this face up top and I scale this in, now when I hit 3, it'll smooth it out and create just a softer transition here. Okay? Now the other way I could have done that, let me just hit undo a bunch of times. There we go. Is before I did any beveling, I should have analyzed this. What is each part doing? This is a crisp edge, this is a crisp edge, this is a soft edge here, it looks like, and that's a soft edge there. So I would do those in sections. So I would go to my edges, and I would double click this one, shift double click that one, and go to bevel. Put my divisions in, shrink my fraction, there we go. So now when I hit 3, those 2 are nice and crisp, okay? And then when I go to face mode and click this one, I go back to bevel, and I put a different bevel on this one. So this one I'll put in like 3 divisions. I'll hit 3 and see, then now I have a nice soft transition happening here. Maybe I'll add a little bit more. 3 is probably good. Or 4. I'll grab the bottom face, and I'll go to bevel here. I'll add a couple divisions. I'll lower that number, and then I'll hit 3. And you'll see now I'm getting something that looks more like the other one did. I have crisp edges where I want crisp edges, and I have smooth edges where I want smooth edges. So a couple things to pay attention to that I did. One, you can select edges and do a bevel on them. You can grab faces and do bevels on them. Now the reason I grabbed faces in some of these cases, is because when I go to edge, I like to double click and have it go all the way around. Okay, so if I double click an edge, it goes all the way around. That's the goal. When I'm up here at the top and I double click an edge, it doesn't go all the way around. Okay, so instead of me having to shift click, and shift click to grab all those edges, I can just go to face and grab the face, and it'll do exactly the same thing, okay? Now, if I were to grab a face randomly like this and do it, it would bevel this edge, that edge, and that edge, which in that case, I wouldn't want that to happen, right? All right, so let's delete that one. Okay, so now if I hit 3, like I said, you'll see we get this in here. I used edges or faces to do that. The other thing to notice is this doesn't look very round. Looking at it from the top view, you can see how blocky this looks. Our 1 and 3 smoothing and rough mode, these are previews, okay? This is not actually what the surface looks like. So under mesh, there's a smooth option, and this will actually go through and smooth out that surface and make it perfectly rounded, okay? So when we're in 1, it doesn't look like it's choppy at all from far away. Now as we get closer, you can definitely still see how faceted it is. But we have to keep in mind, where are we going to be located at, right? How far away from the object are we going to be? We can also hit 3 when it's at this point, and it definitely looks a lot better than it did a minute ago, okay? Now the other thing we're going to notice, I'm going to go back to the top view. You may not be able to see it from here, especially with the projector the way it is, but this is not perfectly round. This is actually, it looks kind of like blocky and chunky. So if I were to create a cylinder and I scale the cylinder up like that, and let me add more divisions to the cylinder. There we go. All right, so I'm going to leave it right about there, okay? So now looking at this cylinder that is perfectly rounded, you can see there's a definite difference between these two surfaces. You see how this is really far apart and that's really close together, far apart, close together? Now it's not a huge deal, but it is something we need to pay attention to because it could be a huge deal afterwards. Now this lotion container here only took me a few minutes to make. I'm going to remake it on this, okay? So a couple important things that I like to do. First, make sure it's nice and even, about the same proportions I had before. I also like to make sure I don't have a cap up here. So you see how we have all these lines going in the middle? I don't like that. I like it to be nice and flat, just like this one is, or was, before we put that smooth on there. Like that. See how it's perfectly flat? I like that. So I'm going to go to my poly cylinder here and say on the caps there's 0 divisions. That way it's perfectly flat up there. I don't have to grab a bunch of faces if I want to do anything to that face. That also took care of the bottom, so we have the same thing. Also the divisions on here. It started off with 20, and 20 is pretty blocky. So I'm just going to set this to, let's say, 50, and that should be a good amount of divisions to put on there to keep it nice and round. Now 50 is a good number. We don't have a crazy amount of divisions. You may ask, why not crank it up to like 200 and get this thing super smooth? If we did that, what's going to happen is it's going to take longer to render this piece because we have more divisions on it, okay? So we want to keep this in a manageable state. 50 is good. Obviously, I could put this up to 5 trillion and it would still work, but we wouldn't see a huge difference, okay? So 50 is good there. The caps are off. I'm going to go to my insert edge loop. We know that I added 2 divisions, right? One here for the top and one here for the bottom. And then I went to faces and I grabbed all these faces up here. And then I just scaled in with the green like that, okay? And then I went through my edges here and here. I added a bevel. That looks good there. Oops. That looks good there. I'll grab this face and that face. Oops. I'll grab one at a time. That face first. Bevel, add some divisions. 4. Go down here, add a division, or add a bevel. There we go. Okay. So now we've essentially created the exact same thing, except this one already looks better, okay? Just because it's based on, it's a cylinder, so it's already starting off perfectly round. All of our other stuff will look nice on there. I went through 2 of the tools, right? I went through inserting edge loops and beveling on this one we haven't touched extruding yet. So what I want to do, and this label doesn't have it itself, but I want to create kind of like an indent on there. Hand cream. It's usually like a hand cream jar. And they usually have something like this, where this is like a little indent where the label would go. Okay, there's just something fancy that they do. There's another one, I think. Nope, that was just right on top. Okay, and again, it's not anything that's crazy difficult to do. It's just something that adds another touch of realism to it, and that's our goal, is to make this look as real as possible. So I'm going to go to faces, and I'm going to grab this face, and then I'm going to go to extrude and extrude it. I'm going to offset it a bit. Okay, and this is where I want that indent to start happening, right about there. I'll extrude it again, grab the blue arrow and push it down. That should be good. And go back to object mode. Okay, so there I have a little indent. Now I can't leave it like this. This is a hard edge right here. That's bad. That's a hard edge. That's bad. So I need to just go in with my edges and just add a little bevel here. 0.25 looks good. That's good there. And then I'll grab this face, just because it doesn't do the edge loop. I'll do another bevel. There we go. Okay, so now I have a nice little lip here. Now all those bevels that I added, if I undid the beveling, I'm just going to pull this off to the side. And I'm going to undo the beveling real quick by going to here and turning this up. There we go. It's pretty close. May not be exact. And I will soften the edges. There we go. Okay. So this undid all that beveling that I did. So you can see there's a huge difference in the quality of the model based on something with no bevels and then something with bevels. Okay, with those roundings in there, it definitely adds to the realism factor of this thing looking like an actual product. Now, one thing that this one's missing is I don't really have a division here to say where the top is. So if you see the tops on all of these, there's basically like the jar goes in here and then the top goes here, and there's this usually like this indent, this like dip. They usually all have that. Okay, so I don't have that on this specific one, so I'm going to create it. So I'm going to go to faces, and I want to do just like I did with the edge loop. I want to grab them all the way around. So if I click on this face, or I double click it, it's going to grab the whole thing because it doesn't know if I want to go up with it or if I want to go that way. So I have to tell it which direction. So I click one, shift double click the next one, and you can see how it looped all the way around. Okay, so then I can just extrude. So I just hit Control E. I can use thickness, wrong way, to control that thing going in like that. Maybe I'll move it up a bit like that. There we go. Okay, so now we have more of a division there. So now it actually looks like that lid is on top of that. Okay, so there's my hand cream. I'm just going to set it off to the side for now. Now, just for fun, let's say I wanted the hand cream jar to be open, because that's a common thing that, you know, so you may actually want that to be open. So I'm going to start the same way. I start with a cylinder. I add my 50 divisions here. I take off the cap. I pull it up to about there-ish, okay, because now this one doesn't have the top. This is just the jar itself. Maybe a little bit lower. There we go. And I'm going to go to faces and click the face, and I'm going to extrude it and shrink this offset in. That should be good. I'm going to extrude it again. I'm going to pull it up this time. I'm going to extrude it again. Oops, I'm not going to extrude it again. I'm just going to delete. There we go. Okay, so now I have basically this hollow container, right? So it looks like what the container would look like if it was hollow. And then what I can do is just extrude this and grab the thickness to like 0.1. And now it looks like this container actually has some thickness to it. Okay, then the rest of this is just beveling. So grab that, add a little bevel. maybe 3 divisions. There we go. That's good. And then edges. And all these edges are going to be the same exact thing, so I'm just grabbing all of them. And then I will go to Bevel. And it turns black just because it's basically it's doing this. Here's the edges, and it's going past it. So it's like inverting, flipping to the other side. So if I make it small enough, it'll just inset slightly. And you can see how I'm typing those in. Most of the time I will type stuff in. And then this face on the bottom, that also needs a bevel. 0.1, 2, 3, perfect. Okay, so there's my jar with the lid open. Now let's say I wanted the little spirally things, because how else are you going to close the lid? Under Create Polygons, there's a thing called a Helix, and the Helix looks pretty much like that. See it? I just need to adjust my properties here. So I'm going to adjust the radius. There we go. I'm going to adjust the width. I'm going to adjust the height. I'm going to squeeze it down. I'm going to adjust the width again. I'm going to adjust the radius more, 0.05, yes. Adjust the height some more, 0.5. Pull this down to here. And then just a little bit scaly, just like that. There we go. So now it looks like we actually have little threads on there that we could screw our container onto. That'd be the right way. Okay, now it doesn't matter that it doesn't match up. You can see here that if we zoom around this, it just kind of stops there and there. We're not going to see the back, so we don't care about the back. Okay, now if this was something being printed, we would definitely care about it. We'd want to tweak it or whatever. 3D printed, not printed on paper. All right, so there's that. And then if I want to make the lid, same exact way. Create a cylinder. Where am I at? Scale it up to fit this thing, so about there. Scale it up to fit the height. That's too small. There we go. I'll go to wireframe just to verify that I have enough room here. That looks good. Okay, I'll go to 50 divisions. I'll take the caps to 0, and I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to pull this up so I can actually see what's going on. So I'm going to grab the face and extrude. Take the thickness down. Oops, not thickness, offset down to about there. And then extrude it again, push it up. And then I'll just steal this guy, no one tell anyone. Like that there, perfect. There we go. So now we have the lid and we have the bottom, and then I'll just add some bevels. So you can see these 3 tools, you can really do a whole lot with them. A little bit more on this. There we go. It's good. And then grab this and this and add some bevel to that. Really small, 0.05. Good. Grab this face, bevel it. Cool. All right. So now I have a lid, and now I have that. And if I wanted to add just that indent to this, I can extrude it again, notch it down. Now I am running into a little bit of an issue where I'm notching it down, and what's happening is I have 2 pieces right here, so I extrude it and it's going through the other piece, so I'm still seeing this piece here. That's not a big deal. I can just grab this top piece here. Where's it at? A little tricky to select. There it is. No, maybe not. Yeah, that should have worked. Hold on. Extrude it again, push it down. There it goes. I just messed up. So that's good. So now we just take this, add a little bevel. Anywhere you want it to be nice and soft, you add a bevel. Anywhere there's a corner, there should be a bevel. Even if it's a small bevel, there should be one there. Grab the face, bevel. 2 segments, 0.25, good. Okay, so lots of things we can do with just these 3 tools. Inserting edge loops, beveling, and then extruding. Those are the 3. Cool. So again, we'll just set this one off to the side. Back there. Okay, and you can see how quickly I'm producing these. It's not like it's taking me hours and hours to do this. It's just using those tools effectively. So now we're going to do another container. So this one was a small hand cream. Open it up, put the hand cream on your hands, and then you're good to go. The next one is going to be something that's going to be a tall container. Ocean can. So something like that, maybe. That would work. Something like that. Okay, they're all kind of the same thing. I'm avoiding these shapes for now, just because these are a little bit trickier, but I'll show that after. Okay, so first thing, we get the proportions. Okay, now that I have something else in the scene, I can use that other item in the scene to kind of help dictate how big these items are. So that looks like an appropriate size. 50 divisions, 0 on the caps. I'm going to grab this one. Oops, not that one. I'm going to go to my insert edge loops. And I'm going to define where the cap would be. Where is that picture I had? Something like this. There we go. So I want to define where that cap is going to be. So I'm just going to go about here for the cap. That should be good. I need to add a division going around. So I'm going to do a bevel here with 2 divisions. And really tiny, just so it's even. Like that, that's good. And then I'm going to, maybe I'll put in 4 here. That's good. All right, so I'm gonna double click this edge and then just scale it in. And then I can go to the next edge, that's why I put the other one there, and then I can push this down. Okay, so now it looks like I have a cap. Even though they're not separated, I have a cap. And then I'll come down to the bottom, and I'll do this. So you see how it comes down and dips in? I'll do that one. So we'll go to Insert Edge Loops. I'll go to about here. Okay, and then we'll go to, just like we did before, about here. And then I'm going to grab all these faces in the bottom. And then I go to my scale and scale it in a touch. There we go, something like that. And then bevel, bevel, bevel. So just grab all these edges and just bevel those. That looks good. Okay, I'll grab this one. I'll do a bevel on that. Cool. Go to the top. This one is obviously a bigger bevel, so I put the bevel on. There we go. And 3. The bigger the bevel, the more segments you're going to need. So that looks pretty good. Okay. Now here, if we look, it's kind of hard to see, but this actually looks like it's maybe a little bit more rounded in that transition. That's no big deal, because I can just come into here. All my stuff is in my way. I can't go to the front view, stuff's in the way. Can't go to the side view, stuff's in the way. There we go. So what I can do is still go to my vertices, and it's going to be hard to see, but if you look at the side of this, I can grab essentially these edges here and here and just pull that down a little bit. And then grab this edge. I have to zoom out just so I can see this thing. Pull that down a little bit. And that'll just help soften that transition from one edge to the other edges. So you see now I have more of this rounding happening here instead of it just going right? Oops. Cool. Looks good. All right, now let's say that I got this far and I'm like, ooh, I think it maybe is too wide around. What I need to do is shrink it in horizontal or widthwise. Again, I don't want to do this and then come over here and do that. That's a horrible thing to do. So what I want to do is grab the green and scale that green in a little bit. And now I've changed the proportions of that. If I decide I don't like where this cap is at, I can go to my vertices. And the reason I chose vertices is because where the cap is right here, those are the vertices that define it. Okay, so it's easier to grab these than it would be to try to grab the edges for all of those, okay? Now I could do it just by doing that, and cheating a little bit, but either way it works. So now I can move that cap wherever I want it to be. Is it a shorter cap? Is it a longer cap? Whatever, okay? So all of the stuff that we're doing for this first part of the assignment, all the modeling stuff, is all based on the fact that I want you to redo all of these things over and over and over again until these 3 tools that I literally use for 99% of my modeling are just ingrained in your skull, okay? All of the stuff that's here, yes, there's a use for it, but most of the stuff you can do with these 3 tools. There are certain things that you can't do, like merging with the tools, but it doesn't matter. Shouldn't need to do that too much anyway, okay? So the first part of this project is modeling the stuff, okay? So you're modeling 3 things. I recommend you model a lotion jar first. Not that one, where's the good one? There it is. Lotion jar first like this. That way you can kind of follow step by step, see what I'm doing. And then you can start to expand on it and create other ones. What I want is 3 products like this that could be anything really, okay? So even though this is a short jar container, and this one's a tall one, and then the other one might be some other kind of thing, they really could be any number of products. They could be like hair gel or shampoo or hand lotions or whatever, okay? So that's the first part, is modeling all these things. 3 things really. Shouldn't be too difficult. As you do the first one, it might take you 2 hours to do the first one, okay? When you do the second one, it might take you an hour to do the second one. When you do the third one, it might take you 15 minutes, all right? Every time you do these, you're gonna get better and better and better at doing them, and faster and faster and faster. So if I said, hey, do 12 more, by the end of one class, you could have 12 more products just done. That's the goal. There's actually a rules. So that's the first part, modeling them, okay? That's actually the easier part. The harder part, I have to open Photoshop for a second while this is going. The harder part is that we have to actually texture these, okay? So if we look at what a label looks like, a can label. Okay, so this is a can label. So if you had a Coke or you had a Campbell's Chicken Soup or Carl's Market, this is what the label would look like on computer, right? So they would go into InDesign and they would draw out what they want the label to look like. Stop opening. All right, and then in the factory they would print up all these things and they would wrap that label around the can or the product or whatever it was. Okay, we have to do essentially that same thing. We have to build the label, and then we have to wrap it around our project so that it makes sense. So just so you can see what this is going to look like, let me save my project first. Sarcona, product modeling 01. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to save one of these just so you can see what's going to happen. We're not going to actually use this in our project. I mean, heard of Carl's Market. About 10 to work. Product Monday, Wednesday. Now I'm putting it inside my source images just for now. Okay. All right. So let's say this is my product, or this is my product. We'll do this one. And what I want to do is just do both. I'm going to assign a new Mila to this. Okay, that's what we dealt with before is Mila, so we'll assign a Mila to it. And we'll call this product label. And I'm going to go to the color. I'm going to click the map button. And I'm going to go to File, click the folder, and grab that label. I'll save just to make sure it doesn't crash. And then I hit 6 to see what the results are. So you can see the results of me grabbing this image, which is a pretty perfect example of what a label would look like, and putting it on my 3D model does not turn out to be exactly what I want it to be. Maya does not know what we want to do with this flat image. Do you want to put it around this part, around this part? Do you want to wrap it this way? Do you want this part to go here and that part to go there? It has no idea, okay? So we have to tell Maya how do you want to be laid out? Okay, that's what we have to tell it. So the process for this is I'm going to assign a different material to this. I'm going to go to my favorites and I'm going to assign what's called a surface shader. Okay, the only reason I'm using this surface shader is because it's completely colored. There's no shading to it at all. So where we would see like a highlight or some dark areas, there's not going to be on this one. So if I make this gray, you can see it's completely gray. There's no indication at all as to where lines are at, which is fine. That's what we want. Let me delete my history. On the color of this, I'm going to map, and this time I'm going to map a checkerboard. Okay, and I'm going to go to the Place 2D texture. I'm going to crank my repeats up to like 20 and 20. And on this checkerboard, you can see that we get a couple different results. This one, we have squares. Okay, we have a picture of a checkerboard, and on this one we have squares, which is kind of perfect. That's what it should be. On this one, we have squares here, but they're all like stretched out, kind of funny. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to lay the texture out so that the checkers are square all over the place and they're uniform. So I don't have a case like this where I have checkers that are really small here and then really big here. Now you know the bottom's doing square. Okay. All right, so let's lay this out. So I'm going to go into my modeling menu, and under UV there's a menu called, or there's a setting here, a tool called cylindrical mapping. Okay, so these three right here are mappers. They're basically like, how do you want to take something 2D and make it 3D? How do you want to take this 3D object and flatten it out? So this shape is essentially cylindrical. So if I go to cylinder, it should do that. Okay, so it's hard to see, so I'm just going to click on this thing just to pull it out so you can see it. But here it is. So this is a cylinder, and basically it's just saying wrap around this item. And right now it's wrapping around only half of the item. You can see how it's only half of a cylinder. So I'm going to go over here to my sweep and say 360, and now it'll wrap all the way around. Okay, you wouldn't pull this off. I just did it just so you can see it. All right, so now it's wrapped all the way around, and you can see that I pretty much have squares nicely throughout this entire thing. So I'll do the same thing on this guy down here. So I'm going to grab him. I'll go to UV. I'll go to cylindrical mapping. I'll set my horizontal sweep to 360. There we go. Now on him, I don't get perfect squares. Okay. Now just kind of like a fluke that the other one is getting more perfect squares than this one. Now this is, if you look at the green bar here and the green bar there, it's taking this texture and it's squishing it to fit inside of this thing. I don't want to squish it to fit. I want it to just be fitting perfectly. So I'm going to grab the green manipulator and just drag it until I get squares. Okay. Now there's going to be kind of like a gray area where, is that square? Is that square? You know, it's really not exact. So we just kind of eyeball it. Like, that's good enough. Okay. So now this looks pretty good here. Now on both of these though, if I look at the top of them, you'll see that the tops are all jacked up. Look at that. And look at that one. Okay. Now the tops are messed up because as it's projecting it this way, anything that's flat is just getting remnants of that texture spread across it. So what I need to do is I'm going to go into what's called the UV texture editor. So under UV, UV editor. And this is how each item is being laid out. So I'm going to go to textures and turn, or image, and turn this off just so I don't have to see it right now. And so basically this here is that can, if we were to cut it down the middle and unfold it and flatten it out. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so that top part that looks kind of funny is right there. This straight line going right across, that's that top edge. I need to be able to see that top edge flattened out. So I should have a circle in here too that shows me the top edge. So I'm just going to hide that. And I'm going to grab the face here. And I'm actually going to grab a couple more faces around it. So I'm going to hit Shift and then greater than. Like that should be good. Okay. And actually anything facing directly up, I want to do the same thing too. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to, actually this first. This, double click that, shift click this, there we go. And then I'm going to hit Shift greater than a couple times like that. That should be good. Okay. So then I'm going to go to UV, and I'm going to say planar map. And planar is just flat. That item is flat, so I'm just going to project it flat. Make sure that the Y is selected, make sure bounding box is selected, make sure keep image width height ratio is selected. I hit project, and now I have squares. Okay, that's what I wanted. Now they're different sized. You see these are big, these are small, so I need to make the smaller ones bigger in order to be the same size. So I grab these corner ones and scale it out until they're big enough to fit. And again, it's eyeballing, it doesn't have to be exact. So like about there, that looks pretty close. Okay, so now if I go to my UV editor again, you'll see that I have a circle right here. Okay, so that's cool. So then I'm going to go down here on the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Now we don't see the bottom. There's no point in really doing the bottom, but it's going to bother me if I don't. So I'm just going to planar map the bottom. And then I will do the same thing where I scale it out until it's square and about the same size. It's close enough. And now I can move that over. Okay. So now this guy here is pretty much laid out. I could come back and lay out this one. I don't think I really like the way this one's laying out. So I'm just going to make that one. Let me see if I want to grab one more or not. Yeah, I think I do. There we go. So I have all those. I'm going to planar map that. Now, right now, this is the hardest part just because we have to wrap our brains around, like, what is this guy actually talking about? But it becomes easier. And this actually becomes a lot easier than doing, like, modeling stuff. There we go. So I'm just wrapping it around this item because I know that it's bigger than that item. So as long as it's bigger, it should be fine. Okay. So there we go. So now this one is done. So now this texture, if I were to bring in another texture and drop it on there, I would get a nice evenly placed texture. Now if the squares were stretched out, what that means is if I brought a texture in, my texture is going to be stretched out. So we can't have that. All right. So now this image here, see the top, this is like 4 squares, right? The top right square, that's the one that we care about. This is where our texture is going to go, is in this top area. Now, if I take a picture from Photoshop and I bring it into Maya, it's going to fill this top area right here, okay? So if I wanted a label to go right across here, that's where my picture, that's where that texture would have to go, is right across that center area, okay? Now, this is kind of a small area to put a texture, because the texture is kind of, the label is kind of an important piece. So what I want to do is have this label be nice and big. So I'm going to go and cut this up a little bit. So I'm going to go to Edge, and I'm just going to double click this one, and then right above it, shift double click that one, and then right above that, I think I missed one right there. There we go. I'm going to go to Polygons and say Cut UV Edges. And so now if I right click and go to Shell, you can see how I can grab these pieces and just move them. So I'm going to grab all these and just move them down. Okay, they're not exact, it doesn't need to be exact, it's okay. All right, so now what I need to do is I'm going to grab all the pieces and just scale up all the pieces. Okay, until they fit nicely within this box. Okay, so this gives me more texture room down here because now that's bigger. So I should be able to fit more texture inside there. Now it's important because if you have a font and you wrote yellow or whatever it is on there, if your texture is not big enough, that yellow is going to look really grainy and really blurry, and you obviously don't want that to happen. So we have to make sure this is big enough to fit all the stuff we want to put in there. So I'm just going to squeeze it down a little bit. Okay, so now let me do that same thing to this guy. Okay, now he has a very similar setup, so I'm just going to grab the top here, Shift greater than to grab the top couple ones that are facing up, planar map it, make sure bounding box Y and keep image height width, and scale this up about there. And I like to just move it over in the UV editor just so it's off of that one. Do the same thing on the bottom. I'm going to grab that, Shift greater than, UV planar, stretch it out, close enough, scoot it off. Okay. Now this one fits perfectly inside this box. All of my textures have to fit in that box. So in order for me to grab these two guys and put them in there, I need to scale everything down so that it fits. So I'm going to go back to Shell, grab everything, and then just scale it down. And then I can just grab these pieces and just say, yep, you'll fit there, and you'll fit there. So kind of like a puzzle, just kind of dropping pieces in so they all fit. Or a scrapbook. You can't overlap. Don't overlap in here though. Alright, cool. So now we have these things laid out. So now what I can do is actually build the texture that'll go into Maya that'll make it look wonderful. So I'm going to grab one at a time, and in the UV editor, I'm going to go to polygons and say UV snapshot. I'll give this a name. I'll call it small lotion jar. I'm going to make it a 4000 by 96 by 4096 image. Okay, that means it's going to be 4000 pixels this way, 4000 pixels that way. We don't care about DPI, dots per inch, resolution, that kind of thing. We only care about pixels. That's it. So this is actually a pretty big texture. If you were dealing with a video game, it would be like 64 or 128 pixels across. Okay. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to grab the big jar and do the same thing. So UV snapshot. Large can. 4096s. Yep. Cool. All right. So now I can jump into Photoshop. Always remember to save. Jump into Photoshop, and then I'm going to open up those two files. And now whatever I do to those two files is going to translate right back into Maya. Product Monday, Wednesday. It puts it inside images, so we have to go in images. Here's those two images. Okay. Now it's very difficult to see because it's like, you know, white on black like this. So maybe we want to click Control L for levels, and then just crank that up so we can see it. Okay, so I just grab that middle one, just hold it up. I did this the other day too. Let me make a new layer, or not a new layer. Let me make a adjustment layer. Thinking. We're gonna make an adjustment layer and put that on there, and then it'll be fine. Levels. I don't know why it's doing that. I'll have to investigate that later. Alright, so that should be good. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is go to a brand new layer, and I'm going to build exactly what I want my label to look like. So the top piece here, this area here, that's where we wanted to put the sticker. So where we have that indent, I want to create a sticker that would go right in that spot. So I'm just going to use Photoshop. I'm just going to draw whatever I want in Photoshop to make it look like I have a sticker right there. So let's say that's my sticker right there. And for now, I'm just kind of not worried about colors. You guys can worry about colors when you do yours. I'm just kind of dropping stuff in just so you can see it. Okay, so that'll be red. And then I'll go with the text tool, and I'll put in label. And I'll make a different color so we can see it. Let's go with, again, I'm kind of picking horrible colors here just so it's obvious. I would never actually use this, or shrink. There we go. Good. Oh my god, that just hurts my eyes looking at it. Change that. Let's go with that. Alright, that's at least not hurting my eyes. So there's the label for the top, and then down here I have this stretch and I have that stretch. I don't actually know which one of these is the front of my can. It doesn't matter though because it's round. If my label ends up on the back, I rotate it around to the front, and then we're done. Okay. So I'm going to go here to my marquee tool. I'm going to go into this area. I'm going to leave some room at the bottom. Okay, your label isn't like wrap underneath. I've never seen that before. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to color it red, and I will put a text on here. Information. That's where product information goes. There we go. Gorgeous. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to turn off the background and just drop in a flat color. This is like, what color do you want your label to be? That's what that is. So my label color itself, or the entire bottle color, will be like this. So now I'm just going to save this to my source images, and I'm going to call it small lotion jar. I'll save it as a TIFF. I don't need an alpha channel, and I don't need layers. Okay, Maya doesn't read the layers, so there's no point in bringing them in. Okay, so that was this guy. So I'm just going to assign my new material. Go to Mila. Spell it right. There you go. And under diffuse, I'll just click the mappy button and find my small lotion jar right there. And then if we look, you can see the label pops right onto the top where we expected it to go. And then the other thing ran off on this side. Okay, so I'm going to go, just so we can see it, if I rotate this, my label on top gets rotated too, which I don't really care for. But it's not going to matter because I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go to my UVs. And I'm just going to grab this top piece here. And I'm just going to go to rotate. There we go, until that's set up perfectly. All right, so now that I know that this works, now I just go into Photoshop and I build exactly what I want that label to look like. Okay, so if I want that label to look like this guy, which I wouldn't, this is kind of a horrible design too. Find something decent. Campbell's is a good label. Lots of information on it. We wouldn't use Campbell's for this, but the amount of detail we would want to use in there. Okay? So looking at this, you can see the kinds of things that are on a typical label. Things that people always forget about. The weight, ounces, that's helpful information to have on there because it adds detail to it. Ingredients are kind of a helpful thing to have on there. Usually it would be on the back of the label, not on the front. So keep that in mind too, that we don't need to texture the back because we're not going to see the back. Our focus is the front of this, so we don't need to worry about stuff like these ingredients. We may want to call out a couple ingredients, like if we look at an actual lotion, lotion jar. If you look at an actual lotion jar, we can see all the fancy stuff that they put on there. Goat milk lotion, bug away. That's a horrible one too. That one's nice. Okay, so even something like this, it has a leaf, it has a name in here, it has what it is, it has that on there. Even something like that looks clean and looks nice, you drop it on there, that's going to go a long way as opposed to something that looks maybe too simple like this, okay? Or too busy like that. That one actually might be a little bit too busy to even read what's happening inside here. Okay, same thing there. That one's okay. All right, so this is where as a designer you can use some of your design stuff to do that. Now we're doing this inside of Photoshop. You don't need to use Photoshop for all of this stuff, but in order for us to fit it inside here, we need to know how big things are. So I just do everything in Photoshop. It has enough tools that we should be able to design it pretty well inside there. If you want to draw something inside of Illustrator and copy and paste, drop it in Photoshop, you could do that too. Or if you had a logo somewhere else, you want to drop it on there, you want to label this after your own company, whatever. Okay? So you just design this stuff exactly the way you want it to look, and then it's just going to go on there and be perfect. Okay? Now you could also share stuff from one to the other. So if you grab the label here and there, we could go to duplicate the layers, and I could say, hey, go duplicate this into the large can layer, and now I'll have that label in my large can layer that I could use right in the center of my can. Okay? And just for fun, I'll just turn that off, make a new layer, and we'll save this one as large can. Make sure it goes in your source images. No alpha, no layers, save. Okie dokie. We'll make a brand new Mila for this guy. Click the map button for color, click the file, and large can. And there it is. Okay. Now the cool thing too with how I just visually just kind of dropped it in to see what it would look like, but now I can see how big that circle is. so that I know how much room I have. Because usually what people do is that they see, where's my stuff at? Oops, this. They see all this label room and they try to fit this really intricate label stretching across this entire thing, and they bring it into Maya and you're only getting like this strip of it, right? So I know that if I'm using this label, that I don't really have a whole lot of room to show a lot of detail. I really need to focus that label into this smaller area. And I'd probably even shrink that down further. Like that, just so I know that it's going to fit perfectly within there. So my label, whatever I do for the front, is going to be within this small region, like about here. Okay? So you're just going to go through and just create a label at that point of what you want it to look like. And here's a good example. Like we used to do Gillette. You can see what the Gillette label looks like. You can see all the detail that goes into this. Their front is obviously a lot bigger, so they have a lot more room to work with. We're working with something smaller, so we don't have a lot. But look at all the detail that goes into the front of the label, the side of the label, and then the back of the label. All of that stuff is detail that's added onto that just to make it look fancy and provide information inside there, okay? So you're going to be making the label from scratch. You're not using a label from somewhere else. You're not copying and pasting it. You're literally drawing it, okay? So once you're done with the first part of this, you should have 3 products. You should have one thing here. It could be hair gel. It could be bike grease. It could be whatever. I don't know what. You'll have another one, probably a bigger one, and then you'll have something else, okay? Think about the composition of how these things are going to be played out. If you look at Google and you do searches for product shot photography, you'll get a really good idea of how these products are photographed and their composition as far as like what's looking good and how they're doing these kinds of things. So stuff like that is kind of neat how they do that. We have 3 different sized items, so obviously doing a layout like that, wouldn't work so good. So we have to figure out ways that we could incorporate all these types of things. Stuff like this is kind of neat. You may get the idea, hey, let me model a lime. Let me model some leaves or a flower or whatever. Here's some more like this. This one actually has some cream inside it, which is kind of neat. That one's hard to see. That one's hard to see. That one has a rock and some other stuff. I don't know why that one's even with the other stuff. Okay, so you'll get an idea of how you want to compose this, what you want to put in there. You may want to have one of these little pump nozzly type things inside there, and you can go from there, okay? So that's going to be the next part of, or the next assignment that we're going to be working on. This lecture